There is one big issue in Diablo 4 that most of the feedback's agreeing with. In fact, I don't think I've seen anyone in my times on the internet actually disagree with the fact that Diablo 4's itemization could be better. That's to put it nicely. People do not like the itemization in Diablo 4. It feels both bad from a dopamine level of, okay, I didn't get exciting drop, as well as a doesn't feel very well put together type of level with the affixes. It's bad on both sides. So I believe this is currently Blizzard's focus on improving the itemization within Season 3. And I can see this by some of the changes they're going to be making, but more importantly, on October 10th, they're doing an update live stream. And on that update live stream, they're talking about two things in particular, which is damage buckets and uniques. And both of these pair together. And we'll talk about why and exactly how I believe they're going to be using these changes in order to improve the itemization in Diablo 4. So let's get into it. So first, let's agree with what the baseline level is. You're going to go ahead and you're going to level up. As you're leveling up, you're going to acquire items. These items will make you strong enough to do nightmare dungeons. You will do nightmare dungeons to continue the level because you need levels in order to be able to continually do higher and higher nightmare dungeons. And while you're doing that, you're getting better gear from the nightmare dungeons. And it's just this giant circle of you do nightmare dungeons in order to both get items as well as get levels. And nightmare dungeons is the only thing that you are effectively doing over and over and over again. Because of that, the gameplay is repetitive. The item drops are repetitive and it doesn't feel very good. We all know this. We all can agree with this. So how do they break up this repetitive gameplay if I just want more and more items to do higher and higher nightmare dungeon tiers? Well, if you watch the dev live stream, you would have seen this, which is their Season of Blood content progression system, in which they explain that there's going to be 5 new bosses, and each of these bosses will be contracted in a different way. You'll be able to get these materials from different parts of the game. For instance, if you want to play Lord Zir, then you would have to go do world bosses as well as Legion events to get the materials you need in order to actually fight the Lord Zir boss. Well, how do you decide which boss you want to actually do? And this is where we start getting into how I believe they're going to address itemization. You see, each of these unique bosses will have their own unique item pool that will drop its own unique items. So effectively, literal unique items will be target farmable through these bosses. Now, when you're hearing this, you might think that does not fix itemization. Uniques both drop in nightmares, as well as uniques don't feel very good. There are quite a lot of bad uniques in the game, and there are some classes that just straight up don't have good uniques at all. So how is Blizzard going to add in-game bosses that have a target farmable pool of items that are bad, fix itemization within the game? And this is where we need to understand damage buckets. And currently in the game, critical strike damage and vulnerability are tiers above other affixes. That's because they're multiplicative in nature and not necessarily additive in nature, meaning that you want as much vulnerability and critical strike damage in order to deal as much damage as possible. Now, because of that, they have pigeonholed themselves into making unique items fairly boring. You're going to have vulnerability and critical strike damage on the item for it to be able to be considered good. For instance, we've seen this when they buffed the recent unique items by basically just adding vulnerability and critical strike damage into a lot of them. So in order for uniques to be good, they need to fundamentally change the concept of damage buckets. Now, here's the thing. On October 10th, that is exactly what that live stream is about. They mentioned there's 2 things they're going to be doing. Uniques are being changed, as well as damage buckets are being looked into. Now, if they change the way damage buckets work and, for instance, make like things like overpower better, that instantly makes some of the base uniques we already have more important, but more importantly, if they change uniques and actually make uniques, I don't know, a good item, for instance, let's say not just the Tempest Roar is going to be good for my Druid boys, then you have a reason to go out there and farm each of these individual bosses from this nice graph that we can see right here. So effectively what they're going to be doing, changing the damage bucket system, adding in good uniques or changing uniques we have, because they both add new uniques in the season as well as rebalance uniques to make uniques important. So now what we can do is, yes, you can farm the nightmare dungeons in order to get the items you want that are rare or ancestral, etc., sacred ancestral, and we already know for a fact that World Tier 3 is only going to drop sacreds, World Tier 4 is only going to drop ancestral, so it will be easier to acquire those items, meaning we're going to be getting to the end game of itemization sooner. So the actual end game of itemization is being moved sooner, not farther away. So you might be thinking, well, that's less content for us to do, but that's because I believe they're focusing or shifting the focus towards unique items. I believe that is their concept of we're going to change the way damage buckets work, and we're going to remodify these uniques to be really good. So that way, if uniques are basically what you're looking for when you get one, that will solve the dopamine issue. There's a unique. Hopefully that's the one I need because the uniques are actually good now. And it also gives you a reason to not just do Nightmare Dungeons, because while the Nightmare Dungeons can still drop uniques, you have the full pull of uniques. Whereas if you choose to set up yourself to get materials to summon these new world bosses, then you're going to be bringing yourself outside of Nightmare Dungeons into other parts of the map. Like I mentioned, world bosses and legions events for Lord Zir, or Hell Tides if you want to fight the Galvanic Saint, for instance. So then we have sort of a mid-game of farming and getting the uniques that are now good through these different bosses, which are outside of Nightmare Dungeons. Now the gameplay loop is looking a little bit different. So now we have an early game of leveling up to do Nightmare Dungeons, getting Nightmare Dungeon gear, going to World Tier 3 and 4, and then from there going and farming your uniques through target farming each of these bosses. That would be more the mid-game. Now getting uniques. There's an entirely new in-game to this game, which is now the Uber Uniques. Because of the new boss, Uber Durio, there is going to be a reason to farm other bosses. You're going to have to farm 2 different bosses to get the materials in order to be able to do the Uber Durio. And Uber Durio is now going to drop Uber Uniques. So the ultimate in-game is going to be farming for and acquiring these Uber Uniques through the new Uber Durio, too many Ubers, Uber Durio in-game boss. That is a mouthful. So effectively, they're doing 3 things. Changing damage buckets so that damage buckets will actually have more variety in uniques, getting them out of the pigeonholed situation they put themselves in, which making rares are better than uniques just because you can have the stats that actually matter. So now that gives them more variety and option for uniques. Then they're buffing the uniques once again in order to make uniques more exciting. They're giving you ways to actually acquire these uniques. And now once you have a build that is good, you have a level 100 Uber Durio boss in which you can farm the materials to farm this boss to attempt to get the ultimate in-game gear, which is the Uber Uniques. Now, this cycle is hopefully more exciting than just farming the same Nightmare Dungeon over and over and over and over and over again. Maybe you get the unique you wanted, maybe you don't. Who cares? Because the unique is probably dog shit literally anyway. So this is going to be hopefully, and we'll find out again on October 10th, and I will be live not only now as of the posting of this video, but also on October 10th to cover it. Hopefully at that time when they address both of these issues, I will be correct, and that is what they're focusing on, and they will have answers to how they're handling the damage buckets as well as the unique item mitigation into actually being good items. Now, whether or not this, in and of itself, the itemization is enough to save Diablo 4 or make the people come back or make the game exciting for you people that maybe feel negative about the game is completely up for you to decide. But it's not the only thing being acquired to the game. It is one such feedback issue that seems to be addressed if you look and you kind of put the pieces together by reading between the lines, seeing what's coming on October 10th, seeing what they're focusing on already. They've mentioned on October 4th, seeing the new bosses. There's a huge heavy focus on unique items as well as Uber Unique, and that is going to be how they're going to make the new in-game function. At least that is my belief by looking at what they have already mentioned. There are plenty of other things they're doing that we've covered in the previous video, like quality of life buffs, for instance. And I do like that while they're trying to get people out of the Nightmare Dungeons, they're not forgetting about the Nightmare Dungeons, and they're still removing some of the objectives that are annoying, still adding quality of life, improving density, and doing things they should be doing to make Nightmare Dungeons feel better, even though they're trying to pull the focus off of Nightmare Dungeons. So I like that as well. Now, if you've been watching me for a while, you know I started fairly positive about Diablo 4. I got to the game, mostly started getting to the in-game, started to get bored, and started to be a little bit more negative. But the thing about me, when I like something, I'll say I like it. When I don't like something, I'll say I don't like it. And at the moment, I feel positive about Season 2. But again, I felt positive before, so we're going to have to see how it actually is implemented once the game comes out. That will be on October 17th. With that being said, I will be seeing you guys on the live stream. Let me know your thoughts about itemization, how they attempt to address it. If you think I'm on the money with where they're going with their new in-game content, or if I'm wrong, leave all that down below. Love you all, and I'll see you on the live stream.